Captain Jacob Vance stared out through the cracked cockpit window of his ship, Stellar Path, watching the endless expanse of space drift into unfamiliar darkness. Alarms blared in the background, though they'd become little more than background noise after the hours of chaos. His ship, a once reliable deep space freighter, was now a gutted husk, its systems fried from the catastrophic malfunction that had sent it spiraling out of warp into uncharted space. His hands trembled slightly as he punched at the navigation controls, hoping for a miracle. The warp drive was fried, communications were down, and most of the ship's essential functions were completely inoperative. He was stranded. Worse, he was lost. The last thing Vance remembered was a sharp crackle of energy on the console, the telltale sign of a surge in the warp core, and then nothing. The black void had swallowed him whole, spitting him out into the middle of an unfamiliar star system. The coordinates made no sense. This was deep space uncharted territory. Alone. His crew was gone. Vance tried not to think about the horrific moments when the ship had first ruptured, the screams of his crew echoing through the corridors as they were ripped from their posts, thrown into the vacuum of space, or worse, crushed beneath the collapsing hull. He'd barely managed to seal himself inside the cockpit, the only section that hadn't been completely destroyed. Now, it was just him, a dying ship, and the cold stars. Vance leaned back in his chair, exhaustion settling into his bones. He wasn't a man given to panic, not after years in the Galactic Navy, not after a lifetime of near-death experiences across half a dozen star systems. But this was different. There was no protocol for being lost in the void, light years from any known spacefaring civilization. He stared at the console one last time, the flickering lights casting shadows across his face. The ship's energy reserves were nearly depleted, meaning life support would fail soon. His options were limited: die in orbit or risk landing on the nearest planet in uncharted, possibly hostile world. The decision wasn't hard. Vance gripped the controls and rerouted the last of the ship's power to the engines. A small, green planet loomed ahead, its surface shimmering with oceans and dense foliage. At least the atmosphere was breathable, according to the ship's scanners. That was something. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered under his breath as the ship began its descent into the planet's atmosphere. The hull rattled violently, heat building up around the edges of the ship as it tore through the upper atmosphere. His grip tightened on the control stick. He had to make this work. He had to survive. The ship groaned as it punched through the thick clouds, and below him, a sprawling jungle appeared, endless trees and mist-covered mountains. No signs of advanced technology. No cities. Nothing. Just wilderness. Moments before impact, the ship's thrusters gave one final, sputtering push, slowing his descent just enough to avoid complete destruction. The stellar path crashed into the dense jungle, tearing through trees and undergrowth until it finally ground to a halt. Silence. The only sound left was Vance's ragged breathing. He was alive. Vance unbuckled himself from the pilot's seat, his muscles protesting from the strain. His body ached, but nothing seemed broken. He grabbed a small emergency kit from under the seat and slung it over his shoulder. He also retrieved his sidearm, a plasma pistol with a limited charge. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The airlock hissed open with a rush of humid, tropical air. Vance stepped out onto the soft ground, feeling the unfamiliar soil beneath his boots. The jungle loomed around him, thick and oppressive, with towering alien trees and strange vines twisting in every direction. It was unnervingly quiet. No birds, no insects, just the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. He walked around the wreckage, assessing the damage. There wasn't much left. His ship was little more than a burnt-out shell, with no chance of repairing it. He was truly alone on this strange planet. The feeling of isolation settled deep in his chest, but Vance forced it down. He'd been trained to survive, even in hostile environments. First, he needed to find water, shelter, and some sort of sign of life. Hours passed as Vance navigated the dense jungle, his instincts sharp. The alien landscape was both beautiful and unnerving. Massive trees stretched into the sky, their bark covered in bioluminescent moss that pulsed faintly in the gathering dusk. He came across a stream and drank deeply, washing the grime and exhaustion from his face. Then, he felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He wasn't alone. Vance froze, listening. The jungle, once silent, was now alive with subtle movements. His hand instinctively went to the plasma pistol at his side. He scanned the area, his senses on high alert. Shadows flickered at the edge of his vision, tall figures moving swiftly among the trees, barely perceptible. A chill ran down his spine. Without warning, they emerged. Alien figures, humanoid but taller than any human, with muscular frames covered in strange, tribal armor made of bone and leather. Their skin was a deep, iridescent hue, adorned with intricate markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. Their eyes, sharp and predatory, fixed on him with an intensity that sent a surge of adrenaline through his veins. They were women at least, their general form suggested as much. But these were no ordinary women. These were warriors. Each one held primitive weapon, spears, blades, and bows crafted from the natural elements around them. Before Vance could react, they closed in, surrounding him in a tight circle. Their movements were fluid, efficient, and utterly silent. There was no escape. One of them, taller and more imposing than the rest, stepped forward. Her face was stern, her eyes filled with a cold intelligence. She wore a headdress made of animal bones, and her spear glinted with a sharp, polished edge. Vance gripped his plasma pistol tighter, unsure if he could even fight them off. His mind raced for an escape plan. The leader's lips parted, and to his surprise, she spoke. The words were harsh, guttural, but the translator embedded in his suit struggled to decode the language. Her voice crackled through the translator, fragmented but understandable. Human, serve the tribe or die. Vance's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at the alien women surrounding him, their weapons ready, their faces unreadable. He was caught. Helpless. Alone. And the only choice he had left was survival. The march through the jungle was grueling. Jacob Vance's hands were bound in a crude but unbreakable rope made from some alien vine, his wrists aching from the constant friction. His plasma pistol had been taken from him, and the alien warriors kept him under tight surveillance, their silent footsteps a reminder that any attempt to escape would be his last. The leader of the group, Kathara, as the others referred to her, led the way, her tall, muscular form cutting through the underbrush with ease. She moved with the precision of a predator, her every step measured and deliberate. Though she said nothing, Vance could feel her presence like a weight pressing down on him. She was their chieftain, or at least their commander, and it was clear from the way the others deferred to her that her authority was absolute. Vance glanced around, noting the terrain. The jungle here was even denser, the canopy above blocking out most of the sunlight, casting the world in a twilight glow. The air was thick with humidity, and strange, glowing plants pulsed faintly in the darkness. Despite his dire situation, he couldn't help but feel a certain awe for the alien world he found himself in. But awe wouldn't save him. He had no idea where he was being taken, or what awaited him at the end of this forced journey. The words Kathara had spoken echoed in his mind, human, serve the tribe or die. They'd made it clear he was no longer a free man. After hours of trudging through the dense forest, the group arrived at their destination, a sprawling village nestled deep within the jungle, surrounded by towering cliffs that formed a natural barrier. The village was unlike anything Vance had ever seen. The buildings were constructed from stone and wood, adorned with bones, hides, and strange glowing minerals that seemed to pulse with energy. Primitive yet somehow advanced, the structures were far more sophisticated than he had expected. The center of the village held a massive bonfire, its flames crackling in the early evening light, casting long shadows over the alien warriors who moved about with purpose. hundreds of them, each one taller, stronger, and more imposing than the last. And all of them were women. Vance's mind raced as he was led deeper into the village. He had expected the tribe to have a few warriors, but this was an entire civilization. The village was alive with activity, alien women sharpening weapons, preparing food, and caring for children. The air was filled with the strange, guttural language they spoke, and Vance's translator struggled to keep up with the rapid chatter. He was brought before a large stone structure that stood at the heart of the village. Kathara motioned to the guards, and they shoved him roughly to his knees before her. The rest of the tribe began to gather, their eyes fixed on the outside of the first man they had seen in generations. Kathara stood tall, her eyes gleaming in the firelight as she addressed the crowd in her native tongue. The translator in Vance's suit only caught fragments of what she said, but it was clear from the intensity in her voice that this was an important moment for the tribe. Her speech ended, and she turned her gaze to Vance, her expression unreadable. She gestured toward him, speaking slowly this time, the words coming through his translator in a chilling monotone. This human is an outsider. His kind has not been seen for many suns. But he is no ordinary male. He comes from the stars, from the worlds beyond the sky. The crowd murmured, their glowing eyes watching him with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and something else, something darker. Kathara continued, her voice rising, he has knowledge we do not. He can be useful to us. But he is also a threat. A threat we must control. She stepped closer to Vance, her towering frame casting a shadow over him. He met her gaze, defiant despite the fear gnawing at his insides. Human, she said, her voice low and dangerous, you will serve the Valkyra tribe, or you will die. There is no other path. Vance gritted his teeth. He had expected this kind of ultimatum, but the weight of her words still sent a chill down his spine. The idea of being enslaved, of becoming some kind of tool for these warrior women, was unbearable. But he knew he was in no position to fight back. Not yet. Serve you how? Vance asked, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. Kathara tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. Then she gestured toward the vast expanse of jungle beyond the village. Our enemies grow stronger with each passing moon. The Orcs tribe pushes further into our lands. They have technology relics of the old ones that give them power we cannot match. They have taken our warriors, our lands, and now they threaten our very existence. You, human, have knowledge of these things. Your weapons, your machines, you will help us reclaim what is ours. Vance's eyes narrowed. The situation was becoming clearer. These Valkyra women were in a struggle for survival against a more powerful rival, and they saw him as a way to level the playing field. They didn't just want his cooperation, they needed it. And if I refuse? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Kathara's lips curled into a cold smile. If you refuse, you will be given to the Orcs. They have ways of extracting what they need from your kind. She leaned closer, her eyes locking onto his. Your choice, human. Serve the tribe, or die in agony. Vance felt his heart pound in his chest. He had no doubt that Kathara was telling the truth. He had seen enough in his life to recognize the real threat when it was staring him in the face. But the thought of being used by these warriors, being dragged into their war, filled him with anger. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think logically. He couldn't fight his way out of this. He couldn't survive in the jungle alone. And he couldn't repair his ship without help. For now, he had no choice but to play along. I'll help you, Vance said finally, his voice steady. But I'm not your slave. I want my freedom when this is done. Kathara regarded him for a moment, her eyes narrowing as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. Help us defeat the Orcs, and you will earn your freedom. Until then, you are bound to the Valkyra. She motioned to the guards, and they untied Vance's hands. The alien women dispersed, going back to their duties, but Kathara remained. She gestured for him to follow her. Vance walked beside her, his mind racing as they moved through the village. The primitive yet organized society around him functioned like a well-oiled machine. Every member of the tribe seemed to have a purpose, a role to play. Despite their savage appearance, the Valkyra were disciplined and highly skilled. He had underestimated them. Kathara led him to a small, circular hut near the edge of the village. Inside, a large table was covered in maps, primitive, hand-drawn depictions of the surrounding jungle and the enemy's territory. She pointed to one of the maps, where a large X marked the location of the Orcs stronghold. "This is where we strike," Kathara said, her voice firm. "The Orcs have taken many of our warriors as slaves. We will take them back, and you will help us. You know how to fight. You know how to use weapons we do not. Your knowledge will be the difference between victory and death." Vance studied the map, his tactical mind already forming a plan. It was a suicide mission under normal circumstances, but with his knowledge and their brute strength, there was a chance, a slim one. He nodded, meeting Kathara's gaze. "I'll help you win. But when this is over, I'm going home." Kathara's eyes gleamed with a mix of respect and challenge. "We shall see, human. We shall see." The weight of his decision settled over Vance like a heavy cloak. He was now tied to the fate of these savage alien women bound to fight their war, whether he wanted to or not. And in the back of his mind, a gnawing question remained: would he ever truly be free again? Jacob Vance crouched behind a massive, moss-covered boulder, peering out into the dimly lit valley below. The Orcs stronghold loomed in the distance, an imposing fortress carved into the side of a jagged cliff. Alien torches flickered along the perimeter, casting an eerie glow over the surrounding terrain. The stronghold was a monument to brutality, walls reinforced with bone and iron, adorned with the skulls of defeated enemies. Vance felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. This wasn't just a tribal skirmish, it was a war zone. Beside him, Kathara's tall, imposing figure moved with a silent intensity, her eyes fixed on their target. She was fully armored now, her bone-plated chest piece gleaming in the firelight. The rest of the Valkyra warriors crouched in the shadows, their muscular forms blending seamlessly with the jungle's dark undergrowth. The air was thick with tension. Vance's heart raced as he adjusted the makeshift weapon he'd fashioned from parts of his crashed ship, a rudimentary grenade launcher powered by alien minerals the Valkyra had provided. It wasn't pretty, but it packed enough of a punch to give them a fighting chance against the technologically superior Orcs tribe. He glanced at Kathara, who gave him a sharp nod. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Orcs stronghold, free the captured Valkyra warriors, and retrieve the Starstone, the ancient artifact that both tribes coveted. The Starstone, according to Valkyra legend, was a relic of the planet's long-forgotten civilization, a source of immense power capable of controlling the heavens. To Vance, it sounded like a superweapon. If the Orcs had truly mastered its power, the Valkyra's chances of survival were slim. But the Starstone also offered something else: hope for him. Vance believed it could be the key to repairing his ship, or at least sending out a distress signal to call for help. Either way, he had no choice. He was committed now. His only way out of this alien war was through it. "Ready?" Kathara whispered, her voice sharp but steady. Vance nodded, checking the charge on his plasma pistol. The rest of the Valkyra warriors were armed with their traditional weapons: spears, bows, and knives made from bone and stone. Primitive, but deadly in their hands. Kathara raised her fist, signaling the warriors to move. They melted into the jungle's shadows, creeping closer to the fortress, their movements almost invisible against the backdrop of the alien night. Vance followed, his nerves tingling with anticipation. The plan relied on stealth. If they could get inside without alerting the Orcs guards, they had a chance of catching them off guard. But if they were detected too early, the mission would devolve into chaos. The group approached the outer wall of the fortress, where Kathara had said the defenses were weakest. Two Orshak guards stood at the entrance, their figures barely visible in the torchlight. Vance could tell immediately that they were different from the Valkyra. The Orshak were taller, their skin a darker hue, almost obsidian, and their armor was more advanced metal plating that looked far more sophisticated than anything the Valkyra had access to. Kathara gestured to one of her warriors, who crept forward with the grace of a predator. Before Vance could fully process what was happening, the Valkyra warrior leaped from the shadows, her knife plunging silently into the throat of one of the Orshak guards. The second guard barely had time to react before another warrior took her down with a bone spear to the chest. The guards collapsed without a sound. Vance's admiration for the Valkyra's combat prowess deepened. They were savage, yes, but they were also skilled, efficient killers who knew how to strike without mercy. Kathara waved them forward, and the group slipped through the entrance, disappearing into the dark corridors of the stronghold. Inside, the fortress was a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, lit by the same glowing minerals that seemed to power the alien technology. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and burning torches. Vance could hear the distant sound of drums, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to echo through the stone walls. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The Orshak were everywhere, patrolling the halls and guarding the entrances to what Vance assumed were the lower chambers where the prisoners and the Starstone would likely be kept. Kathara motioned for Vance to stay close. They had reached a large stone door at the heart of the stronghold. It was guarded by two more Orshak warriors, both heavily armored and wielding weapons that looked far more advanced than anything Vance had seen on this planet, energy spears that crackled with raw power. Vance's pulse quickened. This was it. If they could breach this door, they'd be one step closer to the Starstone. Kathara whispered to Vance, her breath hot against his ear. You will take out the guards. Use your weapon. We will handle the rest. Vance nodded, swallowing hard. He carefully aimed the grenade launcher at the two guards. He had only a limited number of shots he couldn't afford to miss. He squeezed the trigger. A dull thud echoed through the hallway as the grenade launcher fired, sending a glowing projectile toward the guards. The explosion rocked the corridor, and the two Orshak guards were engulfed in a blast of heat and debris. Their energy spears fizzled and died, their bodies crumpling to the ground. The Valkyra warriors wasted no time. They surged forward, crashing through the stone door with raw strength and ferocity. Inside the chamber, Vance's breath caught in his throat. The Starstone. It floated in the center of the room, suspended above a massive stone pedestal, its surface pulsing with a faint, otherworldly glow. The artifact was larger than Vance had imagined, roughly the size of a man, with strange, geometric patterns etched into its surface. It radiated a soft, blue light, and even from across the room, Vance could feel its power thrumming through the air, like the hum of a great machine. But they were not alone. Around the pedestal stood several Orshak warriors, their eyes widening in shock as the Valkyra stormed into the chamber. At their head was a figure unlike any Vance had seen before, an Orshak leader, draped in ceremonial armor that shimmered with a metallic sheen. Her eyes glowed a fierce crimson, and she held a staff that crackled with energy. Intruders, she hissed, raising her staff. Chaos erupted. The Orshak leader unleashed a blast of energy from her staff, striking one of the Valkyra warriors and sending her flying across the room. The rest of the Valkyra charged forward, engaging the Orshak in brutal, hand-to-hand combat. The room was filled with the sound of clashing weapons and the screams of battle. Vance dove for cover, firing his plasma pistol at the Orshak leader. The shot went wide, hitting the wall behind her, but it was enough to distract her for a moment. Kathara took advantage of the opening, charging at the leader with her bone spear raised high. The two clashed in a blur of motion, the leader's energy staff crackling with power as it met Kathara's spear. Sparks flew as they battled, each strike filled with lethal intent. Vance's attention shifted to the Starstone. The artifact seemed to pulse faster now, as if reacting to the violence around it. He wasn't sure how, but he knew he had to reach it. If he could just activate it, maybe he could turn the tide of the battle or find a way to escape this nightmare. Dodging through the chaos, Vance sprinted toward the Starstone. His fingers brushed against its smooth, cool surface, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The room, the battle, the sounds, they all disappeared, replaced by a deep, resonating hum that filled his mind. Visions flooded his senses, images of alien worlds, of great machines rising into the sky, of stars bending and breaking. The Starstone wasn't just a weapon. It was a conduit, a piece of something far greater than this planet, this war. It was ancient technology, far beyond anything the Valkyra or the Orshak could understand. But as the visions overwhelmed him, a voice echoed in his mind, clear and commanding. Human, you are not its master. You are but a tool. Use it, and you shall be bound to it forever. Vance recoiled, shaking his head to clear the strange voice. The battle was still raging, and Kathara was locked in combat with the Orshak leader. He had no time to dwell on the meaning of the Starstone's warning. With a surge of adrenaline, Vance gripped the Starstone and activated it. A blinding flash of light filled the chamber, and everything went white. The blinding light of the Starstone slowly faded, and Jacob Vance blinked, disoriented. The once chaotic chamber had been transformed. The bodies of fallen warriors, both Valkyra and Orshak, lay strewn across the stone floor, but the energy crackling through the air had shifted. The Starstone pulsed with a low, rhythmic hum, as if it had awakened to something far beyond the battle that had just taken place. Vance stumbled backward, his mind still reeling from the flood of visions the Starstone had thrust upon him. Alien civilizations, ancient conflicts, starships unlike anything he had ever seen, all these images still swam in his consciousness, too overwhelming to process fully. He had touched something ancient, something powerful, and he knew instinctively that it had altered him in some fundamental way. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Kathara stood a few paces away, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead, but her eyes were locked on Vance. She had survived her battle with the Orshak leader, who now lay dead at her feet, her energy staff shattered beside her lifeless form. The remaining Orshak warriors had fled, unwilling to challenge the power of the Starstone, leaving the Valkyra victorious for now. Human, Kathara said, her voice hoarse but steady. What have you done? Vance struggled to find his voice. His head was still spinning from the Starstone's influence, but one thing was clear: the artifact had responded to him, and in doing so, had chosen him for something far greater than this conflict. I activated it, Vance said, his voice barely a whisper. The Starstone, it's not just a weapon. It's something else, something ancient. I don't fully understand it, but it showed me things beyond this world. Kathara stepped closer, her gaze hard, but there was something else in her eyes to fear. The Starstone is sacred to our people, but its power is not meant for us to wield recklessly. It was said to be the key to ruling the heavens, but those who sought to control it, they were lost. You've done what no Valkyra has ever dared. You've bonded with it. Vance's blood ran cold. Bonded? The word sent a chill through him, echoing the warning he had heard in his mind when he touched the stone. He looked down at his hands, half expecting them to be glowing or changed in some visible way, but they appeared normal. Yet deep inside, he could feel a pulsing presence, like a second heartbeat, faint but undeniable. Bonded, he repeated, his voice filled with dread. What does that mean? Kathara's expression darkened. It means the Starstone has chosen you. Its power flows through you now, and you cannot escape it. To use the Starstone is to be bound to it forever. Vance's heart sank. He had hoped that the Starstone might be his ticket out of this nightmare, way to repair his ship, to send a signal home, to finally escape the savage conflict between the Valkyra and Orshak. But now, it seemed he had only become more entangled in their world. I don't want this, Vance said, shaking his head. I didn't ask for this power. Kathara's eyes softened, just for a moment. None of us asked for the roles we are given, human. But now the Starstone is yours, and with it, our fate is in your hands. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy shroud. He had been an outsider, a lost pilot trying to survive in an alien world. Now, he was something tied to the very heart of this planet's destiny. But Vance still had his own desires, his own goals. He wasn't ready to become a pawn in this ancient game. I helped you defeat the Orshak, Vance said, his voice stronger now. I did what you asked. But you promised me my freedom when this was over. Kathara regarded him with a long, measuring look, her face inscrutable. The flames from the torches flickered, casting shadows across her sharp features. Freedom, she echoed. You believe you are free? Do you not understand, human? You are bound to the Starstone now. There is no freedom from it. Its power will call to you, pull you deeper into its purpose. The Valkyra may release you, but the Starstone will never let you go. Vance clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. He had fought, risked everything, and now, just when he thought he could finally leave this place behind, he was faced with yet another trap. No, he said firmly. There has to be another way. There's always a way out. Kathara's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something pity in her eyes. Perhaps there is, she said, her voice quiet. But the Starstone's secrets are not known to us. It is an artifact of the Old Ones, and its purpose may go beyond anything we understand. If there is a way to break its bond, only the stone itself would know. Vance's mind raced. The Starstone had shown him visions of faraway places, of technology that seemed almost magical. Maybe, just maybe, if he could harness its power fully, he could find a way to use it to get back to his own people. But there was a risk, a huge one. The stone wasn't just a tool, it was a force, something with a will of its own. And if he wasn't careful, it might consume him. I need to see the Starstone again, Vance said, his decision firming in his mind. I need to understand what it wants. Kathara steadied him for a long moment, then nodded. She gestured to the remaining Valkyra warriors, who stood silently in the aftermath of the battle. Leave us, she commanded, her voice brooking no argument. The warriors bowed and exited the chamber, leaving Vance and Kathara alone with the Starstone's soft glow. Vance approached the stone cautiously, his pulse quickening as he felt its presence reach out to him once more. The artifact hummed in response to his proximity, and he could feel the bond between them strengthen. It was as if the Starstone recognized him, acknowledged him as its new master or perhaps its servant. Kathara watched from a distance, her arms crossed over her chest. You are playing with forces you cannot control, human. But if this is your choice, so be it. Vance placed his hands on the Starstone again, the cold surface sending a shiver through his body. The visions returned, but this time, they were clearer, more focused. He saw stars shifting, entire galaxies bending to the will of something vast and ancient. He saw the Old Ones, the race that had built the Starstone, using its power to shape worlds, to control the very fabric of reality. And then, he saw himself. He stood alone, surrounded by darkness, the Starstone hovering before him. Its voice echoed in his mind once more, clear and commanding. You seek freedom, human, but freedom is an illusion. You are bound to us now, as we are bound to the stars. Serve, and you shall wield power beyond your understanding. Refuse, and you shall fade into nothingness. Vance clenched his teeth. I didn't ask for this, he said aloud, his voice filled with anger and defiance. It matters not, the Starstone replied. You are chosen. Serve or die. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Vance felt the weight of the Starstone's power bearing down on him, pressing him to his knees. He could feel its will, pulling at him, demanding that he submit, that he accept his place in this grand, cosmic order. But Vance wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. With a roar of defiance, he pulled his hands away from the Starstone, breaking the connection. He staggered backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but he remained standing. Kathara approached, her expression unreadable. "You resisted it," she said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and concern. "No one has ever resisted the Starstone." Vance straightened, his eyes burning with determination. "I'm not going to be a slave to this thing," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll find a way to control it. On my terms." Kathara nodded slowly, a hint of respect in her eyes. "You are strong, human. Stronger than I thought. Perhaps you are worthy of the Starstone's power after all." Vance shook his head, still trying to process everything that had just happened. "I don't want its power. I just want to go home." Kathara stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Perhaps the Starstone can show you the way. But be warned, its path may not be the one you expect." Vance met her gaze, seeing the weight of her own burdens reflected in her eyes. He wasn't alone in this struggle. The Valkyra were fighting for their survival, just as he was. And now, their fates were intertwined. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The Starstone still pulsed behind him, a constant reminder of the power he had touched. But for now, he had made his choice. "I'll help you finish this war," Vance said finally, his voice steady. "But when it's over, I'm leaving this planet. No matter what the Starstone says." Kathara gave a small nod, her expression resolute. "We will see, human. We will see." And as the two of them stood in the quiet aftermath of battle, the Starstone's faint glow casting long shadows across the chamber, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that his journey had only just begun.